Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and tonight I've got Mac with me. Welcome, Mac.
Good evening.
Gio is unfortunately still away. He is in fear that Chelsea will finish above Manchester United. So keep your ears peeled to that in our second part. But on today's podcast, we're of course going to be giving you our thoughts on the action from the Premier League this past weekend, and we'll also preview the second leg of the quarterfinals of the Champions League. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social media, both on X and Instagram. Our handle is at @houseof_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. All right, Mac, let's get started into the first game that we're going to cover. Of course, straight into the title race. And this one happened early Sunday morning. Honestly, of course, it ruined my Sunday morning, the way this game went, and overall the final score. That's Liverpool 0, Crystal Palace 1. And yeah, I mean, we have to start off by giving credit to Crystal Palace, I think. Fantastic game. And to my memory, maybe the other game that stands out from Crystal Palace is maybe a number of years ago when they went to the Etihad. And am I mistaken? Was it Andrews Townsend that scored that fantastic goal?
Yep.
Must have been that. But apart from that, this I think would have been easily their best performance from back to front, Crystal Palace, that is. And on the flip side, Liverpool, who on the backside of losing to Atlanta 3-0 at home in the Europa Conference League. Of course, we didn't cover that in our previous podcast. But, Klopp wanted a reaction. He definitely didn't get the reaction that he would have wanted. Liverpool unable to score in 2 back-to-back games. And even though there were a lot of chances, you kind of have to say Crystal Palace deserved to be winners here. And Liverpool, this probably is the last gasp chance that they had to sort of keep pace with the title race. It looks unlikely from here. But overall, Mac, what were your initial thoughts here?
Well, I want to alleviate some of your doom and gloom. I think you maybe took it a little bit too far than what I would feel. They're not out of the title race. They're definitely not. They're still in the conversation. It is just 3 points, but it was a big 3 points. And what you talked about is having an instant reaction, and what you would expect is from the initial kickoff, that Liverpool would have been at it. But Crystal Palace, as you highlighted, were the better team. They have come out with an interesting shape considering their new management, playing under a 3-4-3, whereas traditionally before under Roy Hodgson, under the previous management before Glasner came in, they are more a structural 4-2-3-1. So maybe that change was kind of a curveball Liverpool wouldn't have adjusted to initially from the onset. But Crystal Palace played well, and I would argue they should have even gone up 2-0 if it not for Bradley clearing it off the line from Mateta scoring on a breakaway. But
Robertson.
My apologies, Robertson. Wrong fullback that I do love dearly. But either way, going into that, you want to also give credit to the first full goal. And you can't even tell how well it was kind of built up, where Klopp's reaction was, wow. Like, not as if it was a mistake, because you could argue there were maybe a serious mistakes, or maybe it was like Endo misjudging placement, his man, Konate maybe in the wrong position. Sure. But Crystal Palace collectively, as they were able to kind of shift the ball around, overlap certain areas, getting 2-on-1 key positions, and then Tyreek Mitchell, who has really been playing as really a defensive fullback for his career at Crystal Palace, having the opportunity to get in the opposition box and put a ball in for an essay, pure class, and love that build out there. But after that point, after that initial barrage of Palace at least keeping level with Liverpool, it really felt like Liverpool were just, it was just a matter of time before they scored. They had so many chances. They had breakaways. They had shots that were saved by Dean Henderson. They really had everything but the finishing, which obviously in these moments in the Premier League race, you need to be able to kind of capitalize and not have those missed opportunities that are going to come back to haunt you, just like a team that we'll talk about later with Arsenal. So it really was, want to blame their start. And it's been a consistent trend for this Liverpool team where they do concede first, but they've had the ability to respond. But unfortunately, you can't always just rely on that. You have to be on the front foot, at least in majority of these games, if not at least some of these games. And Liverpool, it feels like, unfortunately, they've always been clawing their way back in, if it be from their pedigree or their talent or just kind of fortunate luck that they've been able to get back into these games and come out and still win. But unfortunately, it rolled up snake's eyes on them in this given day, and they weren't able to. I think, for me, what epitomizes this game in a way is where it was the block that should have gone in. I think it was from Jota. What's the shot? Who's the one that took the shot off of
Klein.
Nathaniel Klein? It was
That
off
would
of
have been
Nathaniel,
Jota, yeah.
yeah, Jota, off of Nathaniel Klein, where a former Liverpool player literally blocking the path from Liverpool to stay in, quote unquote, stay in the title race in some ways. So
Right.
it feels a little unfortunate there. So for me, again, like I said, to kind of recap, is where probably maybe I was surprised about the shape Crystal Palace played with it. Liverpool weren't able to just lost the front foot and never got themselves back into it. And really, to conclude, is they have really no one's to. I know it's easy to say, but they have no one to blame but themselves, because they were given so many opportunities to grab hold of it, and it wasn't just one individual, right? It wasn't Darwin Núñez missing 9 chances. No, it was Núñez missed a few, Diaz missed a few, Salah missed a few, Jota missed a few. It was consistent trend throughout the entire team. Is you've had the opportunity to take it, and you just kind of let it slip. It was unfortunate from their perspective, but great on Crystal Palace, like I said, and you said too.
Exactly, and you didn't even mention, I think, the biggest chance, and that would have been Curtis Jones on a breakaway 1v1, missing the target fully there. So, yeah, like you said, Liverpool really have no one else to blame but themselves with not being able to score against Atalanta and against Crystal Palace in these last 2 games. But the problem as well is rooted in the fact that this is the 21st game this season that they conceded first, I think, out of 50 odd games in all competitions. And if you're going to concede first in nearly half of your games, and you have to sort of bounce back and try to chase games, it eventually is going to catch up to you. And I think I mentioned this to you, and others in our private conversations. I think it's that run of form where Liverpool had after the New Year up to probably middle of March, where a lot of injuries were happening, a lot of players were missing, but still the team was, we can all agree, was overperforming. You saw Connor Bradley come in and play amazingly well. Endo and McAllister had their sort of resurgence. And now that, and of course, even Darwin Núñez and Luis Diaz were scoring semi-regularly, but now goals have died out. And it seems like Liverpool have run out of options, ideas in a sense. But also, teams have kind of started to figure out, and I really want to point that out in the Palace shape, where you did have Lerma playing as a left center back. You had Munoz playing as the right center back. Klein playing as the right center back. But then you had Mitchell and Munoz on each side, doubling on Diaz and Salah, preventing any real creativity from them, forcing the midfield to be more creative. And yes, you have Jones and Szoboszlai, who you expect to be a little bit more creative and provide that, but it definitely didn't turn out this game. There were chances, but ultimately Crystal Palace played fantastically well in defense. So got to give them credit there. Yeah, I do have to say one other thing that really stood out as well is, I know that, I think I was watching the highlights on Match of the Day, and the commentators were saying, big credit to Eze, Olise, and Mateta. Of course, they played really, really well, but I did want to highlight the midfield pairing of Will Hughes and Wharton, who played amazingly well, in the fact that Liverpool really do well in the counter press and forcing teams to make mistakes from trying to play it too quickly because of the counter press. What Will Hughes and Wharton did at Anfield was amazing, nothing short of that, because of how composed they were. They took that extra second to draw a defender in to create a little bit of an opening for that next pass, or just to take a foul and relieve some pressure. So that game plan, and of course everyone playing fantastically well, is really what's going to come down to for Crystal Palace to get a win, and that's what they did. Glasner, I think, got his second win for Crystal Palace in the Premier League, and won at Anfield, which, hey, it's not something that Crystal Palace are unfamiliar with. Of course, a number of years ago, they were the one, I think it's Cristanbul, they call it, who derailed Liverpool's title ambitions. So could it be the same this time around? I guess we'll have to wait and see. I do agree with you, Mac. There is still a chance, but this, of course, off the back of that Man U draw, feels like a heavy, heavy blow for Liverpool. So I guess let's move on to the next game.
Just want to touch on one more thing. I really liked your point on Wharton coming in as a new signing in January, and he's still 20 years old. Great to see him jump on the scene. And if whatever happens with Eze and Olise, at least they have, looks like, a young prospective midfielder there. But I do want to give a highlight, which you mentioned briefly, was Mateta, which for him, his ability to hold up the ball, be comfortable taking players one-on-one in few touches in these moments, has been, I think, a very much a missing piece, where you saw, I would argue, the last year and a half or so, where it's been Edouard one game, Mateta the next game. Edouard one day, and they didn't know who their traditional striker was. To where I would argue, their best lineups were without any striker, and we had Zaha in there. But it seems like Mateta has taken hold of that striker position under his name, and he's playing phenomenally well. And I think the separation has been his ability to hold the play, draw in fouls, link up play, and now he's adding more consistently that odd goal, which I think he should even. If it wasn't for Alisson's quick reflexes, he would have got a goal himself, not just once, but then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, from Andy Robertson, too. So, wanted to be able to finish off there. But yes, let's move on to the next game, of course.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you were watching this one probably closely as well. Arsenal had a chance to really build the lead at the top of the table. Unfortunately, Aston Villa were there to spoil the party. 2-0 winners on the day. Arsenal honestly started the game quite well, as we kind of expected them to. And first half was played really well. I think Arteta said that first half was probably one of the best first halves that Arsenal have had in sort of his managerial career there. But it kind of fell apart in the end of the second half, where it seemed like, to me, not really looking into the stats or really into the tactics too much. Arsenal kind of ran out of energy, and Aston Villa just came at them with more of that desire towards the second half, and of course eventually got their goals, some through luck, some through amazing individual skill. Of course, Ollie Watkins, will talk about that later. But Matt, what were your overall takes on this game?
I think it was, I do agree with Arteta, I do agree with you. They started off phenomenally well. They should have gotten down to the lead. There was the trading of opportunities between Ollie Watkins and Leandro Trossard, mere seconds apart, it felt like, where Watkins to the post and Martinez makes a huge save off of Trossard. Other than that, in terms of the balance of play, in terms of threat level, Arsenal were there. They just couldn't get that final pass in the final moment. There's a couple times Odegaard put Saka through, wasn't able to corral possession. A couple times Trossard was able to get a shot off, wasn't able to. Jesus, of course, needs to take 7 touches before shooting. We understand that's how it is. But, again, in those moments, or even Havertz being just slightly offside in a couple of his late runs that he was trying to make to get over the top. For me, I feel like the adjustments, and not to throw cold water on any individual player or to poke blame, because that's what's happening a lot on Arsenal Twitter. Not that I follow or dive too much into it, but I do happen to see it on occasion. I do want to pinpoint the decision by Arteta on twofold. One, and I know these two players were influential in how they changed their system coming in this year, but I think we've seen the proof in the pudding of how well, one, Havertz is played as a striker. So to move him out to kind of placate the rotation in the central midfield wasn't too good for me. I understand Jorginho needed rest. He's old, whatever that may be. Fine. But I would argue maybe having Partey to be at least start off, so you start off the game with a little bit more solidity back there, instead of having Havertz in that position, which he did do well. But I think the difference of him as Jesus a striker is big. Even more so, in my opinion, is the Zinchenko at left back. You saw continuously, even in Aston Villa's first goal, he was actually in a right center mid position when he's supposed to be playing left back, right? Defensively, out of possession, his job is to be in the left side of defense. But because of the tactical fluidity, or maybe his just lack of awareness, I think it also highlights where there has been zero talks about him getting a contract extension, and his contract ends at the end of the next year. There hasn't been any word around that so far. So, and he's been kind of dropped off on the team, with Kivior stepping in and with Julian Timber looking to kind of go for regain full fitness. I think that was a big miss to kind of rejig this lineup now in this race. Whereas and we may talk about shortly with Man City, they did a full rotation in terms of their starting players. They had 6 players in terms of who started in the Champions League versus more 7. But Arsenal played with majority of the starters. I would argue made the few switches that they did make were tactically incorrect. And for me, that cost them in this game, at least not to come out with the tie. Because if you don't concede that first goal, I don't see the second goal happening. And that comes to, for me, like I said, in regards to the Zinchenko and Jesus, they're positioning their spots in the lineup. That's what screams out to me. Do want to go give full credit to Aston Villa, because as what you highlighted, and apologize, I know I'm going a bit long here, where the first half, Arsenal did dominate possession, weren't able to finish. But as Aston Villa, the game got further into it, Aston Villa grew into the game, got much more comfortable being in possession in their own third with Arsenal, waiting for them to come onto them, feeling comfortably to play out from the back. And that's when, if you break Arsenal's press and get into their final third in those transitional moments, that's where you're going to start to create opportunities. And that's how they got their first goal. And because of the pressure it heaped, they got their second goal. So full credit to them, what Unai Emery's done in terms of being aware of, okay, if we can just survive this amount of time, we'll have enough time in where our players can figure out how do we break this team down? How do we get in those right positions where we can potentially expose them on the other end? So full credit to them there.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I pointed out as well, I think, in our group chat. I know your feelings on Jorginho in terms of maybe his ability over the long span of a season, but I think this was severely missed in a game where, actually, I think we highlighted in a preview, where it was the midfield that Aston Villa would, I think, any other sort of look at it in terms of man for man, their midfield is probably their weaker point compared to their offense, who have Ollie Watkins and of course Diaby and Leon Bailey. And the defense is not too bad as well. It's just sometimes the midfield that maybe run out of legs and are not as disciplined. Of course, Douglas Luiz was missing for this game as well. So I thought perfect time for Jorginho to be there, not to really even do much, but other than just keep the ball ticking in a game that, in the first half, of course, Arsenal did have a lot of chances and a lot of possession. Ultimately, yeah, I agree. Trossard should put that chance away. Havertz had a chance as well, if I'm not mistaken. And unfortunately for Gabriel Jesus, it looks like it's just been an inconsistent season, whether it's injury, whether it's something else, and he has those dips in form where it just didn't work out that way. So that's the thing that really stood out for me. But yeah, Aston Villa, got to give them credit. I wouldn't necessarily even say that, and I agree what you're saying, and I think I see where Arsenal fans are talking about Zinchenko's positioning for the first Aston Villa goal, but I do have to give them credit, and that's exactly what we're talking about. They were comfortable, Aston Villa, because I think that was off of a corner, the second/third phase of that play, where they're comfortable enough to play that ball, rotate it, and swing it down to the left-hand side. Can't remember, I think it was probably Luca Digne who squares that, and you see Paul Terrace making the run, and Saliba tried to get there, and then it's just not dealt with, and then you just have a glaring space where, yeah, I mean, if I wouldn't really fault the Arsenal defense if you're dealing with a corner and everyone's kind of just man marking, you kind of stay with your man and just block off the chances. So that in itself have to give Aston Villa credit, I guess, and just look at, unfortunately for Arsenal, but the second goal, like you said, it wouldn't happen if Arsenal are not down, because, of course, Ollie Watkins, even though he finishes quite well, you don't really expect Arsenal, the way that they were getting back in that first half. I think Watkins had a similar chance in the first half. Trossard was the one that actually came back and made that got that final touch on the ball that really stopped the chance for Watkins. And yeah, so got to give credit to Watkins there. Personally, I did have a thought that Raya went down a little too early for that shot, but again, margins are there, and so it could have gone either way. Ultimately, Aston Villa, though, get a huge win, all 3 points here, when I am getting the double over Arsenal. And the day that, yeah, Arsenal could have extended that difference, they also took a loss there, and it's all City who have did win the previous game and sort of hold that position now very comfortably. Mac?
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating point, because I think the order of these games occur is going to be a recurring factor, right? Where last weekend Arsenal played first, and that immediately heaps pressure, and if they were to win, heaps pressure on Liverpool and Man City to keep pace. With Man City winning, it heaps pressure on Liverpool and Arsenal. Oh, we have to be able to respond, right? So it's very interesting where the order of these games for the remainder of the season are always going to kind of it's its own game in itself, how you deal with that pressure. Do you sit down and watch the games played? And kind of what most recent one kind of screamed out to me is where there was an instance where you saw the clip of the Bayern Munich team watching the Leverkusen Dortmund game, and Leverkusen came to win it back in like the 86th minute, scored 2 goals, something like that, towards the very end of the game. Sorry, that was Bayern was about to play Dortmund, and Leverkusen just came back to win their previous game right before. Immediately afterwards, you see Bayern Munich have a kind of capitulate in that game. You see the lack of faith, considering their demoralizing result that's happened just moments before them coming onto the pitch. So I think that factor in it is going to be very interesting as we kind of go through the rest of the Premier League title race. And before we talk about City, there's one player I do want to highlight individually. Aston Villa, player I didn't know much about, and I know he's been in and out of the team for them, and there's been reports that he actually wants to go back to Italy. But Nicola Zaniolo, who played on the left wing side against Ben White, I feel like he was, especially in the second half before he went off, and he wasn't even on the pitch when the Aston Villa ended up scoring. But what he was able to do in possession, because whenever there was that kind of escape, that outlet, he was the one winning a one-on-one duel with Ben White consistently to be able to grab possession, retain it, get Aston Villa up the pitch where they can get a little bit semblance of relief off of that Arsenal press, which I think is a very interesting to see how teams deal with it, because normally when you're playing against Arsenal, and something I like to highlight is, okay, worry about the left back side, who's going to be one-on-one that situation, how can you take them out? But it seemed like the reverse of that, where Zaniolo consistently won those duels with Ben White, was able to regain possession, corral it, and get his team off the pitch. And I think him individually as a player, if I know he's more so playing due to the injury factor, players not being available for this game. For example, if Doug Luiz is probably healthy, even though weirdly enough he's the left winger and Doug Luiz is defensive mid, he's probably the one that's left shortchanged. But I think I'd be interested to see and hope he stays in the Premier League a little bit longer, because I definitely think there is a quality player in there.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that. Definitely seen as well a number of different rotations for Aston Villa, and it's going to be huge for them to see how they finish the remaining games, because of course we'll talk about maybe the top four finish in the second part. But let's walk on to City now. Just quickly before we take a break, of course, City won 5-1 at home against Luton Town, and the first goal that they score, unfortunately for Hashioka, who is the one who is credited with the own goal, but if that's how you're going to start the game against Man City, taking a Holland acrobatic finish to the face to an own goal, that's just unfortunate. But of course, City go on to get multiple goals. Holland gets another one with a penalty, and even Vardiol, 2 games in a row scoring bangers. This is not really much else you want from City, I guess. But any quick thoughts on City before we wrap up this part, Mac?
No, this was one of their 2, I would argue, free hits remaining for the rest of the season. They still have to place Nottingham Forest, which they have the softest schedule out of the kind of the teams in the title race. And Pep Guardiola has to be happy looking down that fixture list, where he was able to rotate in Lewis, Kovacic, Nunez, Alvarez, Doku, all players who are all not going to start in the Champions League coming up, and as well as be able to get Holland get his goal, and not just the own goal, but get his actual goal, and KDB off early into the second half so they can be ready around. So it was a free hit. It's what we expect. And Luton's future won't be decided from this game. It'll be on the rest of their results to see if they're able to stay up themselves. So what was expected for sure.
Yeah, I mean, City definitely winners on the weekend, so we'll definitely touch on them a little bit later as well in the second part. But let's take a quick break here, Mac, and we'll be back covering some more action. So stay with us, guys. Welcome back to Hustle Footy, guys. We are going to continue our podcast now, discussing some other of the remaining Premier League games that took place this weekend and also on the day of recording today, Monday. I guess I'll toss it to you, though, Mac, first. Could you pick any of the remaining games and just give us a little bit so we can chat about some of these results?
See, you would think I would start with Manchester United tying and potentially Ten Hag on his way out, especially after the Chelsea result. You think I would start there, but I'm actually going to start with something that, towards the beginning of the season, I had a different feeling about, and that's Newcastle. At the beginning of the season, I called that they potentially could be in some hot water if things don't turn in their favor. But I guess unfortunately for them, they exited all the competition so quickly, it kind of gave their chance to the season to reset. And I think we're starting to see what this team should be like if they're at full health consistently. First, want to be able to highlight Alexander Isak. I think outside of the traditional top 6 teams, he's the best player. And I think if they're potentially looking to be able to fund that next potentially expansion, that next crop of signings of players, I think they may potentially offload him for quite sizable cash. I think you could easily get it. Arguably right now, I'll take him over Ivan Toney and Victor Osimhen easily right now in terms of what we've seen him play in the Premier League so far, as well as what he's done so far in the Champions League. But this result, couple things. Right before, in terms of our previous podcast, we and I threw a whole lot of cold water on any Manchester United fans that saw, is there a potential for them to make a top 5 position, potentially be back in the Champions League race? And it was because of the point separation. I'm going to make the other argument for Newcastle, where I see there is a path for them to reach a top 5 position. Right now, they're 10 points out, 6 games remaining. that's a tough look. But let me just break down the numbers and give a little bit of a hope to a Newcastle fan here. One,
All right.
because of this result, Newcastle are now ahead of Tottenham in goal difference. So really, is it 10 points? No, it's 9 points. So what do you need? You need 3 wins and hope Tottenham get 3 losses. Again, I know Gio right now is somewhere smiling and probably crying a tear of joy. But the next 3 games in order for Tottenham are Arsenal, Chelsea, and then Liverpool, and they're still to face Man City. Realistically, of their last 6 games, could you see them potentially lose all 4 of those games? There is a realm, there is a universe where it's possible. In that same fixture list, Newcastle faced Sheffield United, Burnley, as well as Crystal Palace. All teams that are close to the relegation battle, if not going to be relegated for sure. So I can also see a path where Newcastle win their next 3 games. And at that point, do we have a toss-up where those last couple of games can potentially decide who makes a top 5, maybe a Champions League position? And that even puts them, Newcastle, closer with Aston Villa. But Aston Villa do have, I would argue, a easier run-in for the rest of the season. So they should be more comfortable. But like I said, the reason being is where I think this game maybe lights a fire under their ass, gives them hope of there is that light at the tunnel. There is that kind of confidence that they could get into that race. Or even if they get very, very close, I think this sets them up for an exciting offseason and next season where, hey, if we're a whole team, if Sandro Tonali can stop making bets, if we can be a little bit more healthy, I think they could be where they were last year, and it wasn't just a one season flash in the pan. And Eddie Howe gets his mojo back with a lot of this players. So again, my excitement, my major takeaway is, are Newcastle back? Or is this the same team as last year, but I would argue even better? So again, very excited to see what they do for the rest of the season, and always love to see Spurs lose.
I mean, you have to give it to Newcastle. I was really heavy on Spurs getting a win here, and yeah, I thought Aston Villa, they probably lose to Arsenal, and then that's Spurs really making a claim for that top 4 spot. But the way you put it, you're sounding very convincing, because those next games for Spurs, I think they really wanted this win against Newcastle to at least, get a little bit of pressure off of the chasing pack, and also have a game above Aston Villa. But now that result, losing heavily at Newcastle, and realistically, their defense looking very, very shaky in this game. Isak, even though you're facing Isak, who, like you said, probably the best player out of the traditional top 6, I would make an argument that he's probably one of the best players in the Premier League. Full stop. That's it. Mm-hmm. So he's just been that great this season. Him and Gordon as well, of course, having fantastic seasons. I think I saw a stat that Anthony Gordon has scored against the traditional top 6 this season, each team. So that is, again, another improvement on him from last season. So moving forward, these 2 guys, if Newcastle are able to keep them together, very, very bright future for them there. But yeah, Spurs just very, very disappointing. A 4-0 loss, just not a good sign at all. And you're seeing a little bit in terms of the mistakes. Udogie giving the ball away, and then poor with the poor back pass. Not a good sign there, especially going into games where you're facing teams that on paper can score. Of course, they're going to be facing Liverpool, and on paper Liverpool can't score, but who knows at this rate if Liverpool can score. So we'll see what happens there. Let's quickly discuss, Mac, the Man U game, just because, again, it's another game that there's so much happening in the Premier League that this game just goes unnoticed. I mean, Bruno Fernandes did get a brace here, but you definitely can't say that Man U were lucky to get a tie here. Even the penalty call that was called, can't remember on who it was, but that in itself was a little bit tough on my end, with the fact that it goes deflected off of a player, and it looks like it's kind of gone off the shoulder of the defender. Of course, Bruno Fernandes equalizes there, but a game where Man U are outchanced 20 shots to 8 shots. I think that's actually one of the fewest amount of shots that Man U have conceded so far in the last couple of months. So that's a little bit of an improvement, but definitely not that big of a step, considering that you are facing Bournemouth, who are, even though they have had a better season, still 13th place in the Premier League. So not a good look there for Man U. Anything quickly on Man U, or did you want to hop on to Chelsea?
So, one, in regards to the shot stat, they've already conceded more shots at this point in a Premier League season than they've done in any individual Premier League season in total and there's still 6 more games to play since Opta's been tracking this. So this has been a horrible season defensively, I would argue. Again, the negative 1 goal difference, a lot of fans been talking about it. It's been the whole year, they've been a flat goal difference, and they've only had 1 win out of the last 8 Premier League games. So they're in terms of, they were previously, I would say, argue coming back from the new year, are they the team in form? Now they're the team in the worst run of form right now in the Premier League. So it's really a big miss. I think it feels weird where you can have such a demoralizing draw. Normally for these big 6 teams that we always talk about, the demoralizing draw is like, oh, you play well, you're just not able to score the chance, and it just doesn't work out for you. That's normally the traditional demoralizing draw. How you have a demoralizing draw and you're the worst team by far still, it's just a weird position to be in, where you feel bad because on paper you're the better team. You spend, 6 times the amount? I would say Casemiro and Bruno Fernandes combined are more expensive than all the Bournemouth starting 11 and maybe the whole entire bench together. Like, it's just a demoralizing factor between how poor you can play and still just get a draw. At least you got something out of the game, but it's still so depressing how poor you played as a whole. So it's just more of the same for Manchester United. And to jump right over into the next conversation for the next game is where, because of the result and Chelsea winning their game 6-0, Chelsea are 3 points back from Manchester United with a game in hand.
Right.
So realistically, if Chelsea win that game, I know, as we know, right now Chelsea, they're coming off a high, so we might have a slow with the performance. But if Chelsea win that game, they're above Manchester United. And if that happens by the end of the season, Ten Hag's gone. No, I think how people have ripped on, how deep, not even just Manchester United fans, I think fans collectively have ripped on Chelsea. And if they finish above you, I don't see, you have no leg to stand on at that point. How do you feel about this? Have I gone too far?
No, I definitely see where you're coming from. It just depends on how Man U can finish the season. But if you make the argument Chelsea does finish above Man U at the end of the season, that means Man U has to finish likely 7th, 8th, maybe even lower than that. So yeah, compared to how they did last season, I don't see a future for Ten Hag in this game, in this league with Man U, just because of the optics on how that would look if you sort of stick by him with the type of games that they've played so far. But gotta give credit to Chelsea. Cole Palmer, again, I'm gonna look straight into camera here. I gotta apologize, Cole Palmer. He has had a fantastic season, regardless however you shape it. I know that there's been a lot of penalty goals, but you got to give him credit. I think he's 19 Premier League goals this season, 1 off from Holland.
No, 20 now. If he's 20, now he's tied with Holland. I just want to let you know, you never believed him. I always did. I just want to make sure that's clear. Everyone knows, okay?
All right.
Jokes. No, honestly, I crow too. Same thing. Absolutely. I think he's in the conversation for the best signing this last offseason.
Has to be for sure. So, hey, gotta give it up to Chelsea. We'll see how they do in the next game, though. Of course, that is. But the next games that are really in our radar, Mac, are the Champions League second leg quarterfinal games, and we've had 4 of them. Again, I'm gonna toss it to you just because I want to hear your thoughts and gives me a little bit of thinking time as well. Any of these games stand out, and for any specific reason?
I think, again, selfishly, the one for me I want to talk about first, where I think I would argue there is more of a clear favorite in all these other fixtures, in my opinion, considering the first round results. I think the Arsenal-Bayern still stands on a coin flip. It'll be interesting to see, and I think what we're going to notice is if Arsenal start off, let's say similarly to the way that they play against Man City at the Etihad, I think they have a fair chance to come out of that with the win. Bayern, I think right now, they are going to be kind of that rabid animal in the corner. That's kind of a wounded animal that's going to come out throwing punches, doesn't kind of know when to be able to give up, because this is all they have left to be able to play for. And that's been very well trodden, as well as Thomas Tuchel is a manager known to be successful in knockout round competition, where as long as we can stop the opposition and create opportunities ourselves, 1 or 2, if we're clinical enough in those moments, we can be able to pull out a win. And he's done that with Chelsea. And so far in the Champions League, he's done decent of that job with Bayern. But if Arsenal are able to keep, I would argue maybe even start the game less so off on the front foot and just be comfortable out of possession, so they don't give themselves that many opportunity to make mistakes in possession, which cost them in the last game, I would argue, and then grow into it and start to be able to express themselves, I'll say, after, let's say, the 20, 25 minute mark. At that point, the game's still tied and Arsenal are going into it. I think that's when they're going to have their opportunity to really expose this Bayern team, where I feel like if you do get a lead on them now, there might be that fragility there. Whereas when they kind of had that first fixture where Bayern's like, okay, no, this is away from home, it's fine. We have kind of nothing to really be able to lose here. We can still be able to come out and just counter. We don't have kind of the pressure of the fans on top of us. Whereas if Arsenal score first in this game, I think the feeling in the Allianz Stadium is going to be one of such porous feelings and depression or anger, even in terms of the fan base, where they may feel to start to come out and play too much into Arsenal's favor and leave them further self-exposed to the back. So again, maybe it's selfish, but I think this, out of any of the ties, is the one that's least decided, in my opinion.
I agree. It's really gonna be a coin toss to see what type of teams we get, because of course we have to mention it. Bayer Leverkusen, congratulations to them. They've just won the Bundesliga in the last weekend. Bayern's going to look at that and come in, I think, with a different energy for this game. This is of course, the only opportunity they get any silverware this season. So what other way to put that away than to beat Arsenal and go into the next round of the Champions League, where anything really could happen. So that in itself is very, very interesting to see. But like you said, if Arsenal do score first, what does that mean for Bayern? And the way that they have sort of broken down, really led to shambles in multiple games this season in the Bundesliga, and this shows because, of course, they weren't able to win this year. You could really see this is Bayern going through a sort of like a live breakdown where you see specific people looking at the team saying, this might be my last year at Bayern, especially some of those older, more experienced players, and maybe they'll be looking elsewhere because even though Bayern will be favorites for the Bundesliga next season, it ultimately as well comes down to how much of a threat in the Champions League they are. So we'll definitely see what happens for this game. I think it is, again, a toss-up, so that's something to keep an eye out for. On the flip side, I wanted to discuss with regards to title races, Real Madrid and Man City. Man City, of course, are home to Madrid, and favorites, of course, with the game, well, the tie level, and Man City at home, you're always going to favor them. But I'm interested to see what type of game we get from Real Madrid, and on the flip side, Barcelona as well, because Mac, I'm not sure if you're aware, both teams won in their respective games last weekend in La Liga, Barcelona and Real Madrid. But the next game that these two teams face is each other in the Liga. So a Clásico coming up. It's going to be a make or break weekend for both teams because I just looked it up. Only 8 points separate these two teams in La Liga. So even though we all had Real Madrid locking down the title, La Liga, if Barca get a win in the weekend, that puts them 5 points behind Real Madrid, and anything really could happen in La Liga. So big week for Madrid. I definitely do see Man City as the favorites, though Real Madrid, it's happened before. I do give them a little bit of a chance still. Of course, it's a 90-minute game and anything could happen. But at this point, I just don't know if they have the capability to be perfect like Crystal Palace were against Liverpool and take their chances on the opposite end. It just has to be a perfect game for them. Whereas Man City really just need to dominate most of the game and then have a clear 3-4 chances to put them away, or just a dominating 15-20 minute period where they just suffocate the opposition and make their dominance felt. So I'm not feeling too optimistic as a Real Madrid fan going into this one, but I'm interested to see what happens after that. But anything stand out from you for this match or any of the two remaining matches that we'll cover as well?
I think you did a great job of summarizing what we can expect from Man City Real Madrid. So I want to touch on quickly the Barca PSG aspect of it, specifically in regards to how well do Barca, I would say, kind of implement their play style. What I mean by this is, as of right now, time of recording, Xavi's already said, yeah, he's done with Barcelona at the end of this year. He's leaving the post. But they're in a very interesting position where they don't have a whole lot of money to sign a new manager. In addition, now it looks like they're playing well in the Champions League. They're doing well in La Liga. Things are starting to look better. Why kind of let him go, pay more money to get a different manager after all of this? And there's been quite a bit of backlash from the fans in terms of how well he's been treated. So I think this fixture is interesting because if Barcelona, I could see going either way because it fits well. Where if Barcelona just kind of possess the ball, very comfortable in possession, don't give PSG a whole lot of opportunities to be able to get it on the break, which I think that they'll be able to excel at. They should feel themselves very comfortable at the Camp Nou. Whereas PSG, they just need one of those situations to go Kylian Mbappe's way, which didn't happen in the first leg, and we're right back on level terms. And at that point, then you're going to start to see a lot of the pressure go onto Barcelona. So I think these two teams have so much to play for. Very interesting in terms of what we talked about even in the previous leg around for Barcelona when they were facing Napoli, where there's going to be a whole shake of this team, both of these teams after this offseason, where if Barcelona get through this, how does Xavi potentially not stay on as the manager? Because if they win this game, you see them as the favorite coming out against either the Dortmund or Atletico Madrid, in my opinion. And if he makes the Champions League final and doesn't stay on for the job, and then you get a new manager, you pay a lot of money, you're in a bad spot. I think even though the football, I think, can be fascinating, or how these two teams may face each other, how they could potentially kind of expose each other's weaknesses very, very well. PSG's midfield, and I would say Barcelona's transition defense, which last season they played very well under Xavi, not so much this season, but done so far well in the Champions League. Again, I'm very excited to see how this plays out because I think the impact, the aftershocks of this matchup are going to be felt not just on these two individual teams, but could have a whole knock-on effects to a lot of other things. Like just to name one is where Roberto De Zerbi is the odds-on favorite for the Barca job. Okay, so if he's going to Barca, then he's not going to go to Liverpool. He's not maybe going to replace Ten Hag, whoever that may be. Where there's just so many different things that could happen. Or if PSG win and continue going to the Champions League, what does that do with their off season in regards to Mbappe leaving? So again, I'm very fascinated on the pitch how this matchup will play out, as well as the impacts of whatever happens afterwards. What could happen in the world of football from it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely looking at one specific player as well, and that's Ousmane Dembele, who will be returning to his old club. A lot of Barca fans I know online have made their feelings known actually, that they are looking forward to hopefully see a bad game, a poor game from Dembele, but he has a chance to make them pay, and it would be, I think, a sweet revenge for him if he can sort of bring his new team past his old team in the Champions League, and that's going to be a huge blow for Barca. So very, very open, I think, still, because anything could really happen. But lastly, from the Dortmund and Atletico game, Mac, I actually think it's a little bit more open than most people would think. Though, in order for Atletico to go through, they gotta. I know we talk about they have some newer players coming through, some of the younger players now, but you have to look at the old core, and you're going to have to ask them to give them an all-time Diego Simeone performance to get through against Dortmund, because Dortmund are going to come through firing on offense. Hopefully, Daniel Martin will be back from this game, and that's a huge, huge plus for them because he was missing in the first game, and it definitely could have gone a different way if he was playing. Atletico, though, will need a huge defensive display in this tie, something that they're very familiar with. But Dortmund, we've seen them do it in the previous round. Can they get it done here? I guess quickly, Mac, before we wrap up, what are your predictions for this matchup?
It's funny when you say younger players for Atletico Madrid. One of the youngest players like 28 in this tournament. It's ridiculous. Still younger than me, so what can I say? But for Dortmund, I think what's going to be interesting is where we saw such a dramatic change, in my opinion, in the previous matchup of Füllkrug to Haller. If Haller comes on, I think I might even favor him to start the game because how well of big of a problem he is. Where Füllkrug, I think, is more mobile, probably better in transition, probably a little bit better of an athlete in that manner. Whereas Haller's such a handful given his height, his aerial prowess, his just confusion or complications that he provides in the box, where that might give a little bit easier of an opportunity if it's a Sancho Adeyemi, if it's a Mall out on the wing and they're trying to create for somebody else inside the box, where I feel like that's maybe where you get a little bit more of joy for Dortmund, and having Haaland in the box instead, I think could be an interesting wrinkle. So even if he doesn't start the game, how early does he come on? If Dortmund aren't able to at least tie the game up, I think would be interesting, because I think he may be a very big X factor to see if they're able to get through, considering, again, he scored in the reverse in the first leg here. So overall, I do agree it could go either way. But it seems like they're kind of, this may be one of the more hostile environments that they play in. I would argue, aside from maybe for them individually, of course, playing at the Bernabeu, I think they might even kind of enjoy the hostility in terms of they may receive. So it might be a little bit twisted in that way, but I think, again, they're still a little bit undecided. I think Atleti should be the slight edge favorite, because I wouldn't be surprised if we have 14 yellow cards in a 0-0 game and 15 added minutes across both halves. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens at all. So it might not be the most enjoyable game to watch from that perspective, but I think we'll still have a fascinating fixture. But Dortmund do have a chance, and I think their best path forward, in my opinion, is up wide those opportunities, get the young players in it behind, create pace, and give Holland opportunities to potentially last bunch of ball, if not full crew in the middle, of course.
Yeah, I mean, very, very interesting. How funny would it be if Dortmund fans just show up and start cheering for Atletico, and Atletico like, well, why is everyone on our side? We were expecting the opposition to be hostile there, but very interesting to see. Anyways, guys, this concludes our podcast for today. If you guys like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social media. That's at @houseof_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email as well, hustlefooty@hotmail.com. It's our email. The next time you hear from us will be Thursday, when we'll be reviewing the Champions League action from this week, and we'll also preview some of the games coming up next weekend. But until then, Mac, thank you for joining us.
Peace out.
See you guys soon.